The envelope in her apron pocket was still sealed. She was terrified to open it. Vesper Larimore is 22. A black woman in a black and white Maid uniform, working a gala for 300 billionaires. She folded away the designer gown her boss left her and put the apron back on. She refuses to be his mistress. Her boss is Kang Min-jae. They call him the Quiet One. A black sea dragon tattoo coils up the left side of his neck, from collar to jaw. He runs the Haedong Circle. Tonight he signs a $2 billion deal in front of the whole room. She carries a champagne tray through the West Corridor. She catches a temp staffer sliding a keycard toward Min-jae's private office. She blocks the door. She calls security. She protects the house, even the one she hides her illness from. 8 months. A secret she guards with everything she has. 300 guests cannot see it. He cannot see it. But the diagnosis in that sealed envelope is about to come out in front of all of them. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Vesper held the gown up to the light and hated how beautiful it was. It hung from her fingers like water, a fall of ivory silk that cost more than a year of her old life, cut for a body he had never asked her to show. There was no price tag. A man like Kang Min-jae did not leave price tags. He left the thing itself on the bed, folded once, waiting, and let the object do the asking. She had let it wait there for 6 hours. Now the clock on the wall said the guests were arriving, 300 of them, cars already curling up the long drive with their headlights cutting the dark, and the gown was still in her hands, and she still had not decided. That was a lie. She had decided the moment she saw it. She had only been letting herself look. She laid it back in its box, smoothed the tissue over it the way you cover something you are done with. Then she reached into the closet and took down the black dress instead, the one with the white apron folded on top of it, and the sight of that plain cotton loosened something behind her ribs. The uniform smelled like starch and like herself. She put it on. Black dress first, the buttons she could do without a mirror, white collar, white cuffs. She sat on the edge of the bed and drew the sheer black tights up her legs, then stepped into the low flats that made no sound on marble, because a woman who worked this house learned early that sound was a thing you spent or saved. Last, the apron, tied twice at the small of her back. She stood, checked herself once in the glass on the wardrobe door. The bun sat low at her nape, sleek, not one strand loose. The glasses caught the lamp. The gold hoops swung and settled. She looked like exactly what she was, which was the point, which had always been the point. And she let her shoulders drop the last inch into place. Downstairs, a string quartet had started. She could feel it more than hear it, a warmth coming up through the floor. Her hand went to the apron pocket without deciding to. The envelope was still there. Of course it was still there. She had checked it 4 times since noon, and each time it was still there, flat and white and sealed. The clinic's return address printed in the corner, in a blue so pale it was almost an apology. Neurology, Sleep and Wakefulness Center. Her name typed on the front, misspelled, Vespar, an R where the E belonged, and somehow the wrongness of it made the whole thing worse. She had not opened it. She pressed it flat against her hip through the cotton and made herself breathe. 8 months. 8 months she had walked these halls and slept in the narrow room off the east stair and let no one in this house see the thing that was wrong with her. 8 months of catching herself against door frames, of the gray coming down over her eyes at the worst hours, mid-sentence, mid-step, the world going soft and far, while her body stayed standing on borrowed will. She had learned the signs. She had learned to sit before she fell. She had learned to call it a long shift, a skipped meal, a bad night, and the house had believed her, because the house wanted to. If she opened the envelope, it stopped being something she could call a bad night. If she opened the envelope, it had a name, and a name was a thing that could be written down, filed, handed to a doctor, handed to a man who owned doctors, a man who owned the road out front and the gate at the end of it, and every guard between here and the city. A man who had told her once, very quietly, that there was nothing in the world he could not fix if she would only let him see it. That was exactly what she was afraid of. She had come to this house with 2 suitcases and a name that was only hers. She had scrubbed the floors of it before she ever spoke to the man who slept at the top of it. Whatever this had become between them in the dark, in the low rooms, in the 8 months, she had kept one thing back, and the thing she kept back was the last proof that she was still a person and not a possession. The envelope threatened that. If he learned she was sick, he would not love her less. He would love her more carefully. He would build a wall around her out of that love and call it protection, and she would spend the rest of her life inside a beautiful room being kept alive. She would rather fall on his marble than live in his glass. She knew how close she had already come. 3 weeks ago, in the pantry off the kitchen, she had gone down between the shelves with a crate of glasses in her arms, and woken on the cold tile with her cheek in a puddle of her own breath. No idea how long she had been under. Seconds. A minute. She had not heard the door. When old Mrs. Beck came looking, she had already dragged herself up against the flour bins and made her hands find the crate and told the woman she had knelt to pick up a dropped fork, and Mrs. Beck had clicked her tongue and moved on. Vesper had stood in that pantry afterward with the whole of her body ringing and understood, all at once, that the next time might not choose a room with a closing door. She had booked the tests the following morning. She had gone alone, in a borrowed coat, on her one free afternoon, and answered their questions, and slept a night wired to their machines, with wafers of adhesive pulling at her scalp, and then she had come home, and waited 9 days for the pale blue envelope to arrive, and, when it did, she had not opened it, because open was a door that only swung one way. A knock came at the door, 2 soft raps, and she pushed the envelope down into the pocket and turned. It's open. Kang Sua leaned in around the frame, emerald satin, gold at her ears, red on her mouth, already grinning at something before she had a reason to. Min Jae's younger sister carried trouble the way other people carried a clutch, lightly, for show, ready to open it. They're asking for you downstairs. Her eyes went to the uniform, and the grin widened. Oh, he is going to lose his mind. You can keep his mind, Vesper said. I have canapés to count. There's a stylist in the blue room who has been waiting for you for 2 hours. There's a gown. There was a gown. Vesper lifted her chin at the box on the bed. It photographs beautifully. It can stay right there. Sua came all the way in and shut the door behind her, and the play went out of her face for a second, replaced by something older. She looked at the box, then at the plain black dress, then at Vesper's face, and Vesper watched her decide not to push. You know what tonight is, Sua said. A party. It's not a party. Sua lowered her voice, even with the door shut. Every name that matters is on that guest list. Every one. My grandmother flew in. The council came. There are men down there my brother has not been in a room with for years, and he put them all under one roof on purpose, tonight, and no one is telling me why. She stopped. When Min Jae does something this large, he is never doing the thing it looks like. Vesper filed that away without seeming to. In 8 months, she had learned that the useful information in this house always arrived sideways, in a sister's worry, in a guard's silence, in the particular way a door was left open. Then it's a good night for me to stay in the apron, she said. Nobody watches the help. He watches the help. He watches one, Vesper said, and turned to the mirror so Sua would not see her mouth. That's his problem to manage. Go down. Tell them I'm coming. Sua lingered at the door. The uniform, she said. Is it the money? The question was gentle, and it landed like a slap because it was so far from the truth. Vesper met her eyes in the glass. No, she said. It's the opposite of the money. Sua didn't understand it and didn't pretend to. She blew a kiss, red mouth, and was gone in a rustle of green, and the door clicked, and Vesper was alone with the quartet, coming up through the floor and the envelope against her hip. She let herself sit on the bed for exactly 10 seconds. That was the rule she had made. 10 seconds where the fear could have her, where her hand could shake if it wanted to, where she could feel the full weight of the 8 months and the misspelled name and the gray that came down without warning. She counted them. The silk in its box glowed at the edge of her sight, like a thing she had killed. At 10, she stood up. The corridor outside was already alive. 2 of the household girls hurried past with trays held at the shoulder, and she fell in behind them out of habit, then caught herself and slowed, because tonight she was not carrying. Tonight she was overseeing, and overseeing meant walking as though the floor belonged to her. She had taught herself that walk, chin level, hands loose, eyes moving, always moving, over the flowers and the candles and the gaps in the line where a guest might want and no one was there to give. She passed a gilt mirror, the height of a door, and did not slow for it. She knew what it held. The main stair opened onto a hall the size of a church, and she stopped at the top of it, one hand on the cold rail, and looked down at what the money had built. 300 people, more arriving, black and silver and jewel colors moving under a ceiling hung with light. Waiters threading the crowd with the exact glide she had drilled into them. The quartet in the corner. A wall of glass at the far end holding back the dark garden, and beyond the glass, at intervals, the still shapes of Yoon Tae-woo's men, watching the night the way she watched the room. And there, at the center of it, not moving, was Min-jae. She found him before she meant to, the way you find the one still point in moving water. He stood near the tall windows with a glass in his hand he had not drunk from, in the midnight tuxedo, the bow tie precise, and men bent toward him one after another to say their piece and step back, and he answered each of them with the smallest motion of his head. He looked calm. He always looked calm. She had learned that the calm was the most dangerous thing about him, that the stillness was not peace, but a kind of enormous attention, that Kang Min-jae was never so awake as when he seemed to be doing nothing at all. The dragon showed dark above his collar, where the ink climbed the side of his neck to the jaw. Even at this distance, even in this crowd, she could see it, and she knew that anyone in the hall who understood what it meant kept half an eye on him because of it. He had not seen her yet. She stayed at the top of the stair a moment longer, in the plain black dress, and let herself have this too, the sight of him not knowing she was there. It was the only version of him that was entirely hers. The instant he found her, everything would change shape. He would not cross to her, not in front of the council, not with 300 of them watching. That was the promise, and she trusted it. But his attention would turn like a searchlight, and she would feel it on her skin for the rest of the night, and she needed one more breath before that started. Below her, a woman laughed too loudly at something. A cork left a bottle somewhere out of sight. Vesper started down the stairs. She took them at the pace of someone who had somewhere useful to be, and by the 3rd step, she was already reading the room the way the room needed reading. The champagne on the west side was low. A knot of older men near the quartet had empty hands and the particular stiffness of people who had run out of things to say to each other. A waiter she had trained was drifting toward the wrong corner, pulled by the noise instead of the need, and she caught his eye across the hall and moved 2 fingers, and he corrected without seeming to, and she felt the old private satisfaction of a thing done right by someone because of her. This was the house she protected, not the man, the house, the running order of it, the 100 small mechanics that turned a fortune into an evening, the invisible work that let 300 rich people believe champagne simply appeared. She had made herself the center of that machine on purpose, because a woman who was necessary could not be kept, only relied on, and there was a world of difference between the two, and she had bled to learn it. Halfway down, her foot found the marble half a beat late. It was nothing, a stutter. The gray touched the far edge of her sight the way it did now, a thumb smudging the corner of a window, and she stopped with one hand tight on the cold rail and stood very still and waited for it to pass. 3 heartbeats, 4. She breathed the way the internet had taught her when she still let herself read about this. Slow in, slower out, and she did not look for a chair because there was no chair, and looking would be the thing people noticed. It passed. It always passed. That was the cruelty of it, that it always passed and left her standing and let her keep the secret one more hour. She loosened her grip finger by finger so no one would see a fist become a hand. A young waiter near the foot of the stairs had stopped with his tray tilting, watching her, worry starting on his face. She smiled at him before the worry could finish forming, straightened her collar as though the pause had been about her collar. "The gray tray goes to the terrace doors," she told him, low and even, giving him a task to carry his eyes away, and he blinked and nodded and went, and the moment closed over her like water over a dropped stone. Nobody had seen. She had made sure nobody had seen. That was a skill now, a whole discipline she had built in the dark, the art of falling and calling it something else, and she was so good at it that some nights she frightened herself. 8 months she had run this exact play and never missed her mark. She told herself that was strength. Some small, honest part of her knew it was only luck wearing strength's coat, and that luck kept a ledger, and that the account would be called. The envelope shifted in her pocket with the movement, a small, stiff whisper against her hip, and she pressed her arm to her side to still it. Not tonight. Whatever the misspelled name in the pale blue corner had to tell her, it could wait behind the sealed flap until the last car left and the last light went out. 300 people were going to look at this house tonight, and every one of them was going to see a flawless evening, a machine that ran itself, a household without a single crack. That was the job. That had always been the job. She reached the bottom of the stairs, and the warmth of the crowd closed over her, and the quartet swelled, and she stepped into the light on the balls of her feet, silent flats, chin level, hands loose, exactly the woman she had built. Across the hall, near the tall windows, Kang Min-jae turned his head. Across the hall his gaze held her for the length of one breath, then let her go. He turned back to the 2 councilmen bending at his elbow, and the small distance between them stretched exactly the way she had asked it to. He had promised not to close that distance until she moved first. Tonight she had no plan to move. She let the crowd take her. A waiter near the east arch had loaded his tray wrong, flutes crowded at the front lip where the first turn would spill them. She crossed to him, slid 4 glasses back with the flat of her fingers, and said nothing. He mouthed a thank you. She was already gone. This was the work. Not the standing near power in a borrowed dress, the flow of 300 bodies and the 400 things that could go wrong among them, and her job was to feel each one a half-second early. She could do it half asleep, which some nights was the only way she did it at all. A hand touched her forearm. Mrs. Bake, the housekeeper, gray and quick, her mouth tight. "West line is short," she said. 2 agency staff never clocked in. Champagne's stacking in the pantry. "I'll take it." "You'll take the floor," Mrs. Beck said. "Send a boy for the pantry. The boys are slow tonight, and the councilmen drink fast." Vesper was already moving toward the west corridor. I'll run one tray and come back. Mrs. Bake said her name once, low, a warning she didn't have time to finish, because Vesper had turned the corner into the quieter hallway where the music thinned to a hum through the walls. The west corridor ran long and narrow between the main hall and the private wing. Servers used it as a shortcut to the pantry and the caterer's staging room. Half the sconces were dimmed for the party. At the far end, where the corridor bent toward Minjae's offices, a single door sat under a brass fixture, and that stretch was supposed to be empty. It was not empty. A man in event staff black stood at the office door with his back half turned, one shoulder hitched up the way a man stands when he wants his hands hidden from the hallway. Sandy hair, a temp lanyard hanging crooked from his collar. She had seen 40 faces like his tonight, hired for the night, gone by morning, and she would not have looked twice, except that his hands were doing something at the lock, and his eyes kept flicking down the corridor toward the party. She slowed without deciding to. He had a card, not the black caterer's key that opened the pantry and the staging room, a thin white card, and he was pressing its edge to the reader beside the office handle, and the reader was blinking red, and he was trying again. Vesper picked up a tray from the pantry ledge 2 steps to her left because her hands wanted something in them, and because a woman carrying champagne down a hallway is invisible and a woman standing empty-handed is a question. She walked toward him at the pace of work. "Bar's the other way," she said. "Light, helpful. You want the main hall, back through there." He turned. Pale, sharp features, a nervous jump in the eyes that steadied too fast, the way a liar steadies. There was a burn scar puckered across the back of his right hand, shiny in the low light, and that hand slid the white card down into his vest before it finished moving. "Just lost," he said. "They sent me for extra linen. Linens in staging. Second door, the one you passed." She kept walking, kept the tray level, and she put herself between him and the corridor's mouth without turning it into a stance. "I'll show you. I've got it." His weight shifted toward the party, toward escape. 2 things landed on her at once, and she did not let either reach her face. The first, staging held no linen. Linen was upstairs, in the second-floor cupboard, and the caterers had complained about the climb all afternoon. The second, the door he'd been working was not a supply door. She knew every knob in this house. That one opened onto the short hall to Minjae's private office, and it stayed locked with a reader that answered to 11 cards, and hers was one of them, and this man's temp lanyard was not. "What's your name?" she said. "Danny," too quick. "Danny?" She smiled with the front of her mouth. "The lanyard says Desmond." His eyes dropped to his own chest. Half a second was everything. She did not run, and she did not shout, because shouting sends 300 people into a hallway, and a man with a card into a crowd he can vanish inside. She stepped once to her right, planting the tray on the pantry ledge without a rattle, and she put her back flat against the office door, so that reaching the lock meant going through her. "You don't want to do that," Desmond said. "Then we'll stand here." He looked at the party end of the corridor. He looked at her. He was measuring her, height, reach, the softness of a woman in a maid's uniform, and she watched the measurement happen and let him make the wrong answer. "Move," he said. "There are 11 cards for this door," she said, quiet, even. "I hold one. You hold a printer's blank and a story about linen. You can walk back to the party right now and I lose your face in the crowd, and nobody's night is ruined." She let it sit 1 beat. "Or you can put your hand near this lock again." His jaw worked. His hand, the scarred one, twitched at the edge of his vest where the card had gone, and near it, she saw the corner of something else. A phone, wedged deep in the vest lining, screen side to his ribs. Not the loose phone of a bored temp. Buried. Hidden the way you hide a thing you've been told to protect. He didn't walk back to the party. He came at the door. He came fast and low, a shoulder aimed to fold her sideways off the wood, and 8 months of pantry shelves and marble stairs had taught her body one true thing: how to not go down. She turned her hip into him instead of away, took the shoulder on the meat of her side, and her flats slid 2 inches on the polished floor and held. The tray she'd set down went over. 12 flutes met the stone in a bright, enormous crash that ran the length of the corridor and under the door of every quiet room. That crash was worth more than any shout. A shout is a woman being difficult. Breaking glass in the private wing is an alarm the whole house feels in its teeth. "Yoon," she said, not loud, into the small radio clipped inside her collar that every senior staffer wore, and half of them forgot they had. "West corridor. Office door. Now." Desmond's hand closed on her wrist and wrenched it off her collar. His grip was stronger than his build promised. He shoved her arm down and pressed her flatter to the door, his face close enough that she smelled coffee and something sour under it, fear or speed, and his eyes weren't nervous anymore. They were doing arithmetic on how many seconds he had. "Give me 10 seconds at this lock," he breathed, "and I'm gone, and you never saw me. You want to be a hero for these people? They own you. They employ me," she said. "It's different. You wouldn't know the difference." The gray touched the edge of her vision. Not now. It came the way it always came, uninvited, a soft pressure sliding in from the sides like the room dimming its own lamps, and her knees registered it before her mind did, that loosening at the back of the legs, the far-off feeling of her own weight. Adrenaline had lit it. The late hour had fed it. 8 months of a thing she would not name had been waiting all night for exactly this. She had maybe seconds before her legs stopped being hers. She spent them. She drove her free hand flat against Desmond's sternum and pushed, not to move him, she couldn't, but to make space, and into that inch of space she brought her knee up hard into the outside of his thigh, a dead leg strike a cook had taught her in a kitchen years ago. His grip loosened, his weight dropped onto the numbed leg and buckled. He caught the pantry ledge with the scarred hand, and the buried phone shifted in his vest, and for one moment his whole attention was on his own balance instead of on her. The corridor filled with the sound of running. Yoon Tae-woo came around the bend at the front of 3 men, and there was no hurry in his face, only the flat economy of a man who had done this 1,000 times. Shaved head, black gloves, the coiled earpiece, the thin scar along his cheek catching the light. He took in the broken glass, the woman braced against the office door, the temp on one bad leg with his hand inside his vest, and he read it the way she read a room. "Hands," Yoon said. Desmond ran. He shoved off the ledge toward the party end and made 3 steps before the second of Yoon's men stepped into the corridor's mouth and filled it, and Desmond met that wall and rebounded, and then Yoon had him. It was not a fight. Yoon took the scarred hand, folded it up behind the man's back in a way that turned Desmond's whole body toward the floor, and set a knee between his shoulders when he met the marble. The buried phone skittered out of the vest and spun across the stone and stopped against the baseboard. "Not the phone," Vesper said. "Don't let anyone touch the phone." Yoon glanced at it, then at her. He didn't ask how she knew it mattered. He tipped his chin, and one of his men crouched over the phone without picking it up, a hand hovering, guarding it like a coal. "He had a blank card," she said. Her voice came out level, and she was distantly proud of that, because the gray was full at the edges now, and her tongue felt a half-beat slow. "White. Went in his vest, left side. He was working this reader when I came through. Lanyard says Desmond. He told me Danny. He told Mrs. Beck's line. He came for linen, and there's no linen in staging." "How long was he on the door?" Yoon said. "I don't know. Long enough to try the card more than once." The reader stayed red. Yoon nodded slowly. On the floor, Desmond had stopped struggling and gone talkative, the way small men do when the big move is over. "You're all making a mistake." "I'm agency. I got sent to the wrong door, that's the whole." "The agency didn't put a card in your vest," Vesper said. "This woman assaulted me. I've got a witness." "You've got a knee in your back," Yoon said, without heat, "and a great deal of quiet ahead of you." He looked up at Vesper. "You're hurt." No. It was not quite a lie and not quite the truth. Her wrist throbbed where the scarred hand had wrenched it, a bracelet of ache already darkening under the gold hoop's shadow. That she could feel. What she couldn't afford to feel was the rest. The way the corridor had begun to breathe in and out at the edges, the way the running men and the broken glass and the man on the floor were sliding toward her down a narrowing tunnel of light. A councilman's aide had drifted to the corridor mouth, drawn by the crash, phone half raised. Yoon's third man peeled off to move the gawkers back with 2 words and a shoulder, and the party beyond the wall went on glittering, as if none of it had happened, because a house like this was built so that its emergencies never reached the champagne. "Take him out the service stair," Yoon told his men. "The card, the phone, everything on him, bagged, logged, nobody's pockets. I want the phone charged and imaged before he lawyers a memory." He crouched, tilted Desmond's chin up with 2 gloved fingers, and looked at the sandy hair and the darting eyes for a long, unhurried moment, memorizing. "Who sent you to that door?" Desmond smiled against the floor, blood on his lip where it had met the stone. "I want a lawyer and a doctor, in that order. You'll want the doctor more soon." Yoon stood. "Get him up." They lifted him. He came without fighting now, dead weight gone cooperative, and as they turned him toward the service stair, his eyes swung one last time to Vesper. Not the arithmetic anymore, not the fear. Something worse, a flat, patient interest, as if he were filing her away, as if she were now the item on his list. "You should have moved," he said. Then they walked him into the dark of the stairwell, and the door swung shut, and the corridor was only broken glass, and the smell of spilled wine, and a woman standing very straight against a door she had refused to leave. Yoon crouched by the baseboard and studied the phone without touching it. "This is why he ran," he said, half to himself. "Not the office. He'd already lost the office when you turned the corner." He looked up at her. "You did the right thing calling it in, and not touching him. Most people grab. Grabbing gets you cut." "I didn't have a plan," she said. "I had a door. You had a door, and you kept it." A rare thing crossed his flat face, close to respect. "Mr. Kang will hear about this before the night's out. It'll come from me, so it comes right." That landed wrong in her chest, and she covered it. Min-jae hearing, Min-jae learning that she had put her body between a stranger and his private door, that a man had wrenched her wrist and driven a shoulder into her side. She knew exactly what that knowledge did to a man like him. It gave him a reason. Reasons were how cages got built. One good, loving, reasonable bar at a time. "It doesn't need to be a story," she said. "It's already a story. It's only a question of who tells it." Yoon straightened, radioed something short, and clipped to a man on another floor, and for a moment, his attention left her entirely. She used the moment. She turned to the pantry ledge as if to right the fallen tray, and she put her hand flat on the cool wood and let it take some of her weight, and she breathed the way she had taught herself to breathe on the stairs an hour ago, in through the nose for a count. Hold. The gray was at flood now, the fullest it had come in weeks. The whole left side of the corridor gone soft and swimming, the brass sconce doubling and blurring. Her legs were far away. Her own heartbeat sounded like someone knocking in another room. Count. She could always count. She got to 4 before the numbers themselves began to slur. "Larimore," Yoon's voice, from very far down the tunnel. "You've gone the color of the wall." "Long night." The words came out on time. which felt like a miracle she was performing from a great distance. I'll get the glass swept before it reaches the hall. Leave the glass, sit down. Can't sit, someone will see me sitting. She pushed off the ledge, and the floor was not where she left it, tilted a few degrees off true, and she corrected, and the correction cost her more than she had. Her hand found the office door frame, held it. The envelope in her apron pocket pressed its stiff corner against her hip, the one thing in the world that had a name for this. Still sealed, still unread, and she thought with the last clear thought before the light narrowed to a coin. Hold, just hold, let it pass the way it always passes. It passed. Not gently, it receded the way a wave drags back down a beach, taking sand from under her heels, leaving her upright by an inch and a door frame. The brass sconce swung back down into one lamp instead of two. Sound returned first, then the cold of the wood under her palm, and last of all her own legs, arriving back beneath her like something borrowed and returned. Yoon's gloved hand had stopped an inch from her elbow. He hadn't touched her. He was watching her the way he'd watched Desmond's face, filing it. That wasn't a long night, he said. It was a long night. She let go of the frame, one finger at a time, testing whether the floor would keep holding still. It held. I'm going to sweep this glass, and then I'm going back to the floor, because there are 300 people out there, and one of them just tried your door, and the last thing this house needs tonight is a second thing to talk about. She met his eyes, and put the whole of what was left of her behind it. Tell Mr. Kang about the door. Tell him about the phone. Don't tell him about the wall. Yoon held her gaze a long moment. Somewhere past the wall the quartet lifted into something brighter, and a wave of laughter rolled through the main hall. 300 people who would never know how close the private wing had come to a very different night. Get water in you, he said finally. It was not agreement. It was not refusal. He crouched back to the phone at the baseboard and left her the dignity of standing on her own, and that was as close to a yes as Yoon Tae-woo gave anyone. She swept the glass. Her hands did it, while the rest of her stood a step back and watched them do it. Steady, ordinary, a woman tidying a spill. She lined the flute's shards into a dustpan and set the fallen tray back on the ledge and smoothed her apron over the pocket where the envelope waited. And only she knew that under the smoothing her fingers were checking, the way they had checked 4 times already tonight, that the flap was still sealed. Still sealed. The name still printed wrong on the corner. She turned back toward the light and the music and the 300, and the last thing she carried out of that corridor was not the ache in her wrist or the memory of the scarred hand. It was the flat, patient way the man had looked at her before they walked him into the dark. You should have moved. Somewhere in a bagged phone under Yoon's guard, her face was already waiting, her schedules, the address of a clinic she had visited alone in a borrowed coat. She walked back into the party, not knowing she had just made herself the most valuable thing in the house to the one man in it who meant her harm. Yoon Tae-woo found Min Jae between 2 conversations in the narrow band of quiet that opened whenever a man of the council stepped back to let another step forward. He came from the left side, the side of the room where the security men clustered, and he spoke without raising his voice above the strings. There was an attempt at the west corridor. Min Jae set his untouched glass on the tray of a passing waiter. He turned only his head. Attempt. Your office door. A temp with a blank card and a phone sewn into his vest. He's off the floor. Card and phone are bagged. The council member who had been waiting for Min Jae's attention drifted, sensing the shift, and held his distance. Min Jae let him drift. Who caught it? Min Jae said. Not who caught him. Who caught it? The whole event, the whole machine, the thing that had almost gone wrong under 300 pairs of eyes. Yoon held a half second. He had been ordered, by the woman in question, to tell the door and the phone, and not the wall. He told the door and the phone. Your housekeeper, Larimore. She blocked the door with her back until my men reached her. She didn't shout. She didn't run. She dropped a tray so the house would feel it. Then she called me on the collar channel. He paused. She protected the room. Something moved behind Min-jae's face and did not reach the surface. His hand, resting flat against his thigh, closed once and opened. That was all. Where is she now? Back on the floor, working. Min-jae looked across the ballroom. He found her without searching, the way a man finds the one lit window in a dark street. She was at the east arch, moving a line of glasses 2 inches to the left on a waiter's tray, saying something short to the boy that made him straighten his spine. Her sleeve had ridden up 1/2 inch over her right wrist. Even at this distance, Min-jae saw the wrong color there, the shadow under the gold hoop, the mark of a grip. He wanted to cross the floor. The want came up his chest like a tide, and he stood inside it and let it break against the thing he had promised. He did not move toward her. He had told himself, 8 months ago, in the low light of a service stair, while she scrubbed a mark off a step that was already clean, that he would not claim her in front of anyone until she claimed herself. That the day the whole world learned her name would be a day she chose, in a dress she chose, on a floor she walked into, as herself and not as staff. He had built that promise like a wall, and he stood behind it now with his jaw tight. Double the corridor, he said. Nobody near that door but our own, and Tae-woo. He waited until the security chief looked at him. The phone, charged and copied, before he invents a memory. I want to know who sent him to that door tonight of all nights. Already moving. And the wrist. Yoon didn't pretend not to understand. She asked me to tell you the door and the phone. You told me. Min-jae's voice dropped a register. Now you've told me the wrist too. Yoon inclined his head a fraction and withdrew, back into the cluster of dark suits along the wall. Across the ballroom, near the tall windows where the caterers had set the signing table, a man had been watching the exchange for its entire length. Han Suk-won stood with both hands folded over the ivory head of his cane, and he had the patient stillness of a man who has spent 60 years learning that the most useful thing in any room is the thing nobody thinks he is looking at. He watched Min-jae's hand close and open. He watched the young man's eyes cross the floor and stop. He followed the line of that stair to its end. A maid, black and white uniform, sheer tights, flat shoes, gold hoops, a low bun, glasses. A tray of glasses in her hands, and a whole room of billionaires around her, and not one of them looking at her, because she was furniture, because she was the help, because that was the entire genius of what she was wearing. Except one man was looking at her, the one man who could not afford to. Suk-won's thin lips moved, a fraction, in what on another face would have been a smile. He had come tonight to lose. He knew it. Every man on the council knew what the papers on that table meant. Kang Min-jae had spent 4 years turning the Haedong Circle's money into things that could stand in daylight. Buildings with deeds, funds with names, contracts a court would defend instead of prosecute. Tonight, before 300 witnesses who each had reasons to keep quiet and reasons to keep watching, he would sign the last of it. $2 billion would cross the line from the dark side of the ledger to the bright side, and once it crossed, it could never come back. For most of the men in this room, that meant safety. Their grandchildren would inherit clean. For Han Suk-won, it meant erasure. His fortune had never left the dark. It could not survive the light. It was made of the exact things the new era was built to bury. When the money went clean, the men who owned dirty money became a problem the clean men would eventually, politely, solve. He had done the arithmetic 100 times, and it always ended the same way. He had 6 months, perhaps a year. Then the quiet young man with the dragon on his neck would decide that Han Suk-won was a loose thread, and the era would not have loose threads. He had come tonight looking for a lever, any lever, something to slow the signing, or bend it, or turn it. He had watched Min-jae for 2 hours and found nothing. No drink in his hand, no laugh he didn't mean, no woman on his arm, no vice, no tell. The man was a locked door with no seam. And then the housekeeper moved a line of glasses 2 inches, and the locked door looked at her, and Han Suk-won saw the seam. He turned to the young council aide beside him. "The staff," he said mildly. "The house staff. They're from an agency or the family's own. The senior ones are the family's, sir. Years of service. That one." He kept both hands on the cane and tilted its ivory head a degree. "The tall one, Larimore, is it?" The aide followed the tilt and found her. "I believe so, sir. She manages the floor. Very sharp, they say." "Very sharp," Han Suk-won repeated, tasting it. "How long has she been in the house?" The aide didn't know. Suk-won hadn't expected him to. He filed the not knowing beside the wrist, beside the closed hand, beside the fact that a man who commanded a room of 300 could not keep his eyes from one woman in an apron for the length of a single conversation. A lever only had to be placed correctly. You moved a mountain by finding the one stone at its base that the whole weight rested on, and then you learned everything about that stone, its cracks, its schedule, the doctors it visited alone, the roads it took home. Han Suk-won was still 2 floors and 1 bagged phone away from knowing that all of it already existed, catalogued, waiting. He only knew, now, where to look. He had walked into the room certain he would lose. He was no longer certain. At the signing table, one of the lawyers straightened the 2 document folders a final time and glanced toward Min-jae with the specific patience of a man being paid by the hour to wait. Min-jae's cousin Ji-hoon crossed to him first, navy tuxedo, collar open, a silver tie clip riding in his breast pocket instead of on a tie. He kept his voice under the strings. "They're ready when you are. The 3 from the East Funds want to sign before midnight. Something about their flight, something about their wives." I stopped listening. He smiled with half his mouth. "Everyone's ready, except you." "I know." Ji-hoon's smile eased off. He had known his cousin long enough to read the small weather of him. Yoon told you. Yoon told you." "She's all right? She's working." Min-jae said it the way another man might say a prayer he wasn't sure he believed. Ji-hoon looked out over the floor, found the maid, looked back. He didn't say anything about it. In the Kang family there was a great deal that was never said about it, and the not saying was a kind of loyalty, and Min-jae knew the shape of that loyalty even when it went unspoken. His cousin only touched his arm once, above the elbow, and moved off toward the lawyers to buy him another few minutes. His sister came the other way. Soo-ah, emerald satin, red lip, a glass of something she wasn't drinking held like a prop. "You look like a man about to sign away $2 billion, she said. "That's convenient." "It would be, except you don't look at the table. You keep looking at the floor." She followed his eyes before he could stop them, and this time they went, and she saw where they went, and she let out a breath through her nose that was almost a laugh. The uniform. She really wore the uniform. She wore the uniform. "I told her she'd unmake you." Soo-ah turned back to him, and under the teasing there was something older and steadier. "You know grandmother's watching you tonight, not the table. You." Min-jae's gaze came off the floor at last and landed on his sister. "Everyone's watching the table. Grandmother isn't." Soo-ah said it lightly and let it drop. "The way you set down something heavy so gently the other person doesn't realize how much it weighed until you've walked away." She kissed the air beside his cheek and slid back into the crowd, emerald into black and gold. He looked for the old woman without meaning to. Kang Jung-suk sat where she had sat all evening, in a high-backed chair near the fireplace that had been carried in for her, deep plum hanbok, jade pin in her white hair, a cup of tea going cold in her small hands because tea was a thing to hold and not a thing to drink. She had the best seat in the room, and she had chosen it for the sight lines, not the warmth. She was not watching the table. Her granddaughter had that right. She was watching her grandson. She had flown across an ocean for this, and not for the reason written on the papers. The papers would sign themselves. The money was clever. The lawyers were expensive. The era would turn whether or not a 78-year-old woman drank her tea. What could not be settled by lawyers was the question the whole council had come, quietly, to see answered. Whether the quiet one, the one who never raised his voice, the one they called the quiet one, half in respect and half in unease, was a man who could lead the family into a world with rules, or only a man who could win a world without them. You could not test that with a question. A man will answer any question correctly if he knows he is being tested. You tested it by building a night where the wrong instinct and the right instinct pulled in opposite directions, and then you watched which way the man leaned when he thought no one important was looking. Young Suk had helped build this night. Not the deal was real, but the shape of the evening around it, the guest list that put old enemies under one roof, the timing, the pressure, the 300 witnesses. She and 2 other elders had arranged for the boy to stand at the exact center of everything he had ever wanted, with everything he had ever wanted resting on him not flinching, and then they had settled in to watch whether anything in the room could make him flinch. She had expected the enemies to test him. She had expected the money to test him. She had not put the maid on the list of things that might. Now she watched him look at the girl in the apron, and look away, and hold himself back from crossing the floor with an effort that cost him something visible, and Jung-suk set her cold tea on the little table beside her chair with a click she alone heard. Interesting, she thought. She did not let it reach her face. Her face had spent 78 years learning not to reach. Han Sok-won intercepted him halfway there. The old man moved into his path with the unhurried authority of an elder who has never once had to ask for room. He offered a small bow, correct to the degree. A remarkable house you keep, Kang. Every glass full, every door watched. He let the second sentence sit a beat longer than the first. I'm told there was some excitement in the West Wing. A staffing matter. Handled by the staff, I hear. Sok-won's cold eyes stayed level and mild. You're fortunate in your people. Loyalty like that is rarer than money. One wonders how you earn it. Min-jae looked at him and gave him nothing. No flicker toward the floor. No tightening at the word people. He had spent 36 years learning to be a locked door, and he locked now. I pay them and I protect them, he said. In that order or the other, depending on the day. A good order. The old man smiled his thin smile and stepped aside, cane tapping once on the marble. Sign your papers, Kang. The room is waiting on you. He watched the young man pass, and he noted the one thing the young man had been careful not to do. He had never once let his gaze drift to the far side of the floor while they spoke. A man who guards a direction that hard is telling you exactly where the treasure is buried. Min-jae walked to the signing table. The lawyers straightened. The 3 men from the East Funds detached themselves from their conversations and came, and the council members turned, one after another, the way iron filings turn when the magnet moves, until the whole slow attention of the room had swung toward the tall windows and the table beneath them and the man standing over the 2 folders. A waiter appeared at Min-jae's elbow with a fresh glass, the toast glass, the one you held while the words were said and did not drink until the pen was down. He took it. 300 people had glasses now. The staff had been moving through the room for the last minute filling them, and Min-jae registered, at the edge of the machine that never fully switched off in him, that the staff moving through the room included her. She was working the far side, filling glasses, her tray steady, her wrist turned so the mark didn't show, doing her job at the exact moment. The whole room's attention lifted off the floor and rose to him. Good, some part of him thought. Nobody's looking at her now. Nobody but me. Han Sok-won, near the window, lifted his own glass and watched the young man over the rim of it, and thought, nobody but you, and you can't stop. The lead lawyer opened the first folder to the signature page. The platinum pen lay across the paper like a small silver bar. Somewhere near the doors, the string quartet lifted their bows off the strings and let the last chord ring out and die, because someone had signaled them, because a toast was coming, because the room had arrived at the hinge of the whole evening, and everyone in it could feel the weight settle. Min-jae raised his glass a few inches. 300 glasses rose with his, a soft glittering tide across the floor. Before I sign, he began, and his voice, low as it always was, carried in the new quiet all the way to the far walls. I want to thank the people who built the house we're standing in. His eyes moved, once, to the far side of the room. Across the floor, a tray tilted. Not much, a degree. The kind of tilt a tired arm makes and corrects 100 times a night. 2 glasses slid a half-inch toward the lip and stopped. She caught it. She always caught it. Her hand came up and steadied the tray, and for a moment she stood there holding it level, and then the gray came down over the edge of her vision the way it had come down on the stairs, the way it had come down in the corridor, except this time it did not lift. This time it kept coming, a slow flood behind the eyes, and the sounds of the room stretched and thinned until the last thing she heard was her own voice, very far away, telling a waiter to move the champagne to the terrace doors, and the tray was already leaving her hands. The glasses hit the marble a half-second before she did. 12 of them, then more. A bright shattering that ran under the music and cut it the way a scream cuts a room. Vesper's knees had already stopped answering. The floor came up sideways and took her shoulder, then her hip, then the side of her face, and the last thing her body did before it let go was turn her cheek so the glasses wouldn't find it. 8 months of training a falling body to fall smart. Even blacked out, some part of her still worked the room. Then nothing. No terrace doors, no waiter, no champagne to move. The gray closed over all of it, and she went down into it like a stone into a well. Above her, the ballroom took a breath and forgot to let it out. For 1 full second, 300 people did the same thing. They looked. A woman in a maid's uniform lay on the marble under the high windows, one arm folded wrong beneath her, the low bun coming loose at the nape, a gold hoop bright against the stone. Nobody moved toward her. That was the thing about a room full of powerful people. They were built to watch, not to kneel. The string quartet kept playing 4 bars into it before the cellist saw and let his bow drift off the string. At the signing table, the pen was still in Min-jae's hand. He had been mid-sentence. Before I sign, I want to thank the people who built the house we're standing in. The words were still warm in the air when the glass broke across the room. He turned his head toward the sound the way everyone did, and then he did not turn it back. The pen came down. Not set down, dropped. It rolled once across the contract, across 4 years of work and $2 billion, and the signature line still blank, and fell off the edge of the table, and Min-jae was already gone from behind it. Cut the music. He didn't shout it. He never shouted. But the words carried the length of the room because the room had gone that quiet, and the quartet's leader lowered his violin and the last note died half-formed. 300 guests turned to watch the host of the evening walk away from the unsigned deal. He went straight across the floor. Not around the edge, where a careful man would go. Through the middle, through the parting crowd, past the ambassador and the 2 fund managers from the east and the woman in diamonds who put a hand to her mouth, and none of them existed to him. His eyes were fixed on the shape on the marble, and the shape was not moving. Somewhere near the doors, an old man leaning on an ivory-topped cane watched the whole thing and began, very slowly, to smile. Yoon Tae-woo reached her first. He had been closest, posted along the west wall, and he did the right thing, the trained thing. He dropped to a knee, 2 fingers to the side of her throat, his other hand already at the coiled earpiece. "She's breathing." He set it up into the crowd, to no one, a fact thrown out to stop the panic before it started. "She's breathing, give her air." Then Min-jae was there, and Yoon moved. It was a small thing, and the whole room missed it, but the grandmother by the fireplace did not. The head of security, a man who guarded the boss's body with his own, shifted back off his knee the instant the boss arrived, because there was only room at her side for one of them, and it was not going to be him. Min-jae went down onto both knees on the marble in a $2,000 tuxedo. Vesper, his hand went to her face, turned it toward him. Her glasses had slid down her nose, and he pushed them back up with one knuckle, a gesture so small and so domestic that a woman in the front of the crowd made a sound. "Vesper, look at me." Her eyelids didn't lift. Under them, her eyes moved, quick, dreaming, wrong. Her lips parted around a word that never came out. A waiter. The terrace. She was still working the room somewhere down in the dark, still holding a tray no one could see. His thumb found the pulse at her jaw and stayed there, counting, and his face, the face they called the locked door, the face that had given Han Suk-won nothing across 2 hours of hunting, his face was not locked now. Her skin was warm and damp. That, at least, he knew how to read. Not a heart stopping, not a body giving out. Something else, something that had taken her all at once and clean, the way a switch is thrown. He'd seen men drop from a blow to the jaw and come up swinging in seconds. This wasn't that. She'd folded from the inside. "How long has she been down?" he said. 10 seconds. Less. "Get the car to the north entrance." His voice had dropped to something flat and fast, the voice for orders that would not be repeated. Not the front, the armored one. Now. Yoon spoke into his cuff. Around them, the crowd had drawn into a ring, close enough to see, far enough to keep their shoes clean, and the murmur was starting to build again. A whisper here, a phone lifted there, 300 people turning the collapse of a Maid into the story they'd tell at breakfast. Min-jae felt the phones before he saw them. He looked up, once. He swept the ring of faces, and the ring of faces went still, because whatever was in that look, none of them wanted it turned their way. "Put them away," he said. The phones went down. Kang Jung-suk did not rise from her chair. The matriarch sat by the cold fireplace with her cup of tea gone cold in her hands, and she watched her grandson kneel on the marble, and she did not move a muscle, and inside her chest, something turned over like a key in an old lock. She had built this night to break him open. 40 guests she'd added to the list herself. Old enemies, patient men, a room engineered to squeeze. She'd wanted to see what the quiet one did when he was pressed on every side at once, whether he'd hold or crack, whether the boy who never raised his voice had a spine underneath the silence, or only more silence. She had spent 2 hours watching him give nothing away, and now he was giving everything away. He was throwing a $2 billion deal onto the floor next to a dropped pen, in front of the 3 men whose money he needed and the 1 man who wanted him dead. He was kneeling on stone with his hand under a servant's head, and the deal could wait, the deal could burn, and everyone in the room could see exactly where his heart was buried. It was, by every rule Jung-suk had lived 78 years by, a catastrophe. She set the cold tea aside on the little table at her elbow. "Well," she said, to no one, so quietly that only the maid arranging the flowers behind her chair could have heard. "There he is." Her eyes did not leave her grandson. Something that had been a question in her all evening had just become an answer, and the answer was not the one she'd come here to test for. She'd come to find out if he could rule. She was watching, instead, a man who would set down the crown to pick up one person off the ground, and she understood, all at once and against everything she thought she believed, that those were the same thing. Interesting, she'd thought an hour ago, when he held himself back from crossing the room. She didn't think interesting now. She thought, him. It has to be him. Han Seok-won thought something else entirely. The old man had come to this gala the way a surgeon comes to an operating table, to find the one soft place and open it. 2 hours he'd probed, and Min-jae had shown him a locked door, a paid smile, a man who kept his eyes so carefully off the far side of the room that the carefulness itself was the tell. A man who guards one direction that hard, he'd told himself, is telling you where the treasure is buried. And here was the treasure, laid out on the marble for 300 witnesses, and here was the man on his knees beside it, and Seok-won's rimless glasses caught the light as he tipped his head to take it in. He'd been right. He was always right. He'd just needed the man to prove it for him, in public, in front of the exact audience whose confidence the deal depended on. There it is, he murmured, and the jade signet ring turned once around his finger. His mind was already 3 moves ahead. The girl, Larimore, the maid who'd been in the house 8 months and had, an hour ago, been nothing more than a name he'd fed to a council aide. Now she was the fulcrum. Now she was the lever long enough to move a man who could not otherwise be moved. Every investor in this room had just watched Kang Min-jae value one woman's fainting body above $2 billion, and a man who could be made to choose like that could be made to lose everything, if you simply arranged the choice. He didn't yet know about the sealed envelope in her apron pocket. He didn't yet know a phone was sitting in an evidence bag 2 floors down, with her face and her schedules and the address of her clinic already inside it. He only knew that the untouchable man had a throat now, and it was wearing a gold hoop and a white apron. He leaned his weight forward onto the ivory cane and watched Min-jae gather her up, and the smile stayed on his thin lips, because ruin, when you finally find its handle, looks exactly like a boss on his knees. Min-jae got an arm under her shoulders and an arm under her knees. "Doorways clear," Yoon said. "North entrance. Cars rolling up now." He lifted her the way you lift someone you have carried before. No adjustment, no fumble, her head finding the hollow of his shoulder like it belonged there. Her arm hung, and Sua, suddenly there out of the crowd, caught it and folded it across Vesper's own stomach so it wouldn't swing. "I've got the exam," Sua said, low. Her playful face was gone. Her red lip was pressed flat. "Ji-hoon's got the lawyers. Go." Ji-hoon was already moving toward the signing table, already spreading his hands at the 3 fund managers with the easy navy tuxedo smile that said family emergency, nothing to worry about, we'll reconvene, buying his cousin the thing his cousin didn't have time to buy for himself. Cover. The family closing ranks around the hole Min-jae had just torn in the evening, without being asked, without being told, the way they'd been doing it for months. Min-jae stood with her in his arms, and for 1 second he stopped. He looked at nothing, or he looked at the whole room, the ring of faces, the abandoned table, the pen on the floor, the $2 billion sitting unsigned under the high windows, the enemies and the allies, and the grandmother, and the old man with the cane. He'd spent 4 years and 36 of them learning to be a locked door, and he had just, in front of every person who mattered, thrown the door open. He didn't seem to care. "Min-jae," Seok-won's voice, dry and mild, floating across the space between them. The old man had drifted close enough to be heard. "A terrible thing, please, don't let us keep you." A pause, waited, kind as a blade. "The contract will still be here." Min-jae looked at him for exactly as long as it took to memorize a face. "Yes," he said, "it will." And he carried her out. The crowd parted, the second time cleaner than the first, because now they understood they were watching something and wanted to be able to say they'd stood close to it. He went through them without looking left or right. Her weight was nothing. Her head rolled against his collar, and he shifted his arm to steady it, and a bead of sweat stood at his temple that had nothing to do with how heavy she was. At the north doors, the cold came in. Yoon had the armored car nosed up against the steps, the rear door already open, the engine running low and even in the dark. Two of Yoon's men stood at the corners of the entrance, with their backs to the car and their eyes on the tree line, because a man down and a boss distracted was exactly the shape of a night someone might choose to make a move, and they were paid to think that way, even when nothing came. A young man in event staff black held the door and stepped back fast when the boss came through it, and for half a heartbeat, Min-jae's eyes stopped on the black vest and the temp lanyard, the same uniform the intruder in the west corridor had worn an hour ago, before he saw the boy was only 19, and frightened and holding a door. He let it go. There were enemies enough tonight without inventing new ones out of a scared kid. Min-jae ducked her through the door and slid in after, and would not let anyone take her from him to arrange her on the seat. He set her down himself, her head in his lap, her legs folded onto the leather, and pulled his own jacket sleeve down over his hand to wipe the sheen from her forehead. "Hospital," he said it to Yoon through the open door. "Not ours, a real one, the one with the neurology floor. Sua has the name." On the phone with them now. And Tae-woo. Min-jae's hand had found her pulse again, at the wrist this time, over the bruise that was already there from a stranger's grip an hour ago. His thumb touched it, and his jaw moved. The man from the corridor, Desmond. "I want his phone opened before we reach the hospital, not after." "It's charging now." "Faster." Yoon held the door a half-second longer. "Boss." He didn't often use the word. "The room saw." "I know what the room saw. Some of them will call it weakness." Min-jae looked down at the woman in his lap, at the glasses gone crooked again, at the loose black hair and the gold hoop and the apron with its double-knotted tie, and at the corner of a pale envelope that had worked halfway out of the pocket when he lifted her, a corner he had not yet noticed, printed with a name spelled wrong. "Let them," he said. He pulled the door shut. Behind the tinted glass, the great house fell away, all its lit windows and its 300 stranded guests, and its unsigned fortune, and its old man smiling on the steps, and the armored car rolled down the long dark drive, with the woman who protected it laid across the lap of the man who just, in front of all of them, refused to let her fall alone. Her eyes were still moving under their lids, still working. Somewhere down in the gray, she was telling a waiter to move the champagne to the terrace, over and over, in a room that no longer existed. Min-jae bent his head close to her ear. "You can stop working now," he said. The car turned out through the gates, and the gates closed behind it, and the story that everyone in that ballroom thought they'd just watched, the fall of a maid, the ruin of a deal, the one crack in the locked door, was not the story at all. The story was only just now telling anyone what it was actually about. It was about what a man would trade to keep her breathing. And 2 floors below the empty dance floor, in a plastic bag on a metal table, a dead man's phone finally took enough charge to light its screen, and the first thing to surface, before anyone had touched it, was her face. The world came back in pieces. First, the sound of tires over a bad seam in the road, a small repeated thud that her body registered before her eyes would open. Then, the smell of leather and antiseptic, and something warmer under it. Then weight, the sense of being held, of her own head resting against a shoulder that rose and fell too slowly for her to be alone. Vesper opened her eyes. The car was dark. City lights slid across the ceiling in long bars, gold and then gone, gold and then gone. Min Jae's jaw was above her, the dragon's tail dark against the collar he had not fixed. His hand was flat on her back, holding, not gripping. She understood where she was before she understood how she had gotten there, and the understanding hit her like cold water. "No," she said. The word came out cracked. "No, no, no." His head lowered. "You're awake." She pushed off his chest and sat up too fast. The car swam, tilted, righted itself. Her hand found the door handle and gripped it, not to open it, just to have something that wasn't him. The contract. Her voice was climbing. "The contract, Min Jae. Where's the contract?" "On a table. It's fine. You signed it." He looked at her. "Tell me you signed it." She heard herself and hated the sound, the begging in it, but she couldn't stop. 300 people, the East funds. The whole night was for the, "You turn this car around. You turn it around right now, and you go back, and you put your name on that page." No. One word, flat. It landed in the middle of the car and sat there. She turned to the window so she wouldn't have to hold his face. Her reflection came back at her over the passing lights, the buns still tight, the glasses crooked on her nose, the collar of the uniform she had chosen over his gown 12 hours ago because she would not be a thing that was kept. And she had fallen on a marble floor in front of the richest men in 3 countries. She had become, in one blackout, exactly the thing she had spent 8 months refusing to be. Her hand went to her face. She pressed the heel of it against her mouth. "Look at me," he said. "Don't. Vesper. You dropped it." The words came muffled through her fingers. "The pen. I could hear people." Someone screamed. "You knelt down on the floor in a tuxedo in front of the council, and you picked up a maid, and everyone with a phone in that room now has—" She stopped. The next breath shook on the way in. "You had 4 years in that contract. I've heard you say it. 4 years turning the dark side of the ledger into the light, and you spent it on the floor." "Yes." "Why would you do that?" It wasn't a question anymore. It was an accusation, thrown at the glass. "Because a signature waits," he said. "You weren't waiting. You weren't breathing right." She shut her eyes. The car slowed for a light. In the quiet, she could hear her own pulse, too loud, the thing that had betrayed her on the dance floor, still knocking away behind her ribs like it hadn't just ruined everything. "Take me home," she said. "Not the hospital. Home. I'll sleep. I do this. I've done this before. I know how it works. I sleep, and by morning." "Where have you done this before?" She said nothing. "Vesper. Where?" "The pantry." The admission came out small. 3 weeks ago, with a case of flutes. "I told Mrs. Beck I dropped a fork." His hand, resting on his own knee, closed once. Slowly. She watched it happen out of the corner of her eye, and understood that she had just confirmed something Yoon had already half told him. That this was not the first floor she had gone down on, only the first one with an audience. "We're going to the hospital," he said. "I don't want. I know what you want." His voice didn't rise. It never rose. That was the terrible thing about him. The quieter he got, the less air there seemed to be in the room. You want to walk into that house on your own feet and pretend the room didn't see you. You can't have that tonight. You can have it tomorrow. Tonight you're going to let a doctor put your name to whatever this is. Her name. The envelope was still in her apron pocket. She felt it there against her hip, the corner of it, the sealed flap she had not broken in 9 days, because a thing without a name could still be argued with. She pressed her arm against her side and felt it, and said nothing about it. The car turned. Ahead, past the driver's shoulder, a canopy of white light, an entrance, a sign she wouldn't let herself read. the automatic doors already parting for a wheelchair someone was pushing out into the dark. Min-jae, she turned to him finally. Her glasses had slid. She pushed them up with one finger, the way he had pushed them up for her on the floor of the ballroom, though she didn't know that part. If I go in there and they find something, you have to promise me you won't. Won't what? The doors slid shut behind the wheelchair. The car eased under the canopy and stopped. Won't turn me into something you manage, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. He didn't promise. That was the first crack, and she felt it open, though she couldn't yet name what was going to come through it. They put her in a gown the color of skim milk. She sat on the edge of a bed in a room with one window and a curtain track that made a small screech when the nurse pulled it, and she let a stranger take her blood pressure and her temperature and, finally, her earrings, the gold hoops, off, onto a metal tray with a paper liner, because the MRI wouldn't take metal. She watched them go into a little plastic bag with her name printed on it, spelled right this time. She noticed that. After the envelope, she noticed when a machine got her name right. Min-jae stood in the corner, with his arms crossed and his bow tie hanging loose, and did not sit in the chair they offered him. Twice a nurse asked if he was family. Twice he said yes, before Vesper could answer. And Vesper looked at the floor and let the lie stand because she didn't have the strength to build a truer one. They took her down a hall on the bed. Machines. A tube of white noise that swallowed her whole and spat her back out 40 minutes later with a headache behind her eyes. They took blood. They stuck small cold discs to her chest and read the lines her heart drew. Somewhere in the middle of it, a resident asked her, kind and tired, whether she'd ever fallen asleep without meaning to, mid-sentence, mid-task, standing up. And Vesper opened her mouth to say no, and then remembered the pantry, the stairs, the edge of the ballroom, and closed it again. Sometimes, she said. The resident wrote it down. By the time they brought her back to the room with the one window, the sky in it had gone from black to the bruised gray that comes before morning. She had lost track of the hour. She had lost track of a lot of things. Min-jae was still standing. She wondered if he had moved at all. You should sit, she said. I'm fine. You've been on your feet since the toast. So have you, he said. You fell down on yours. It wasn't cruel, it was just true, and the truth of it made her look away. The door opened. The woman who came in wore a white coat over a gray blouse, reading glasses hanging from a fine chain, silver threaded through a short natural afro. She had a tablet in one hand and a manila folder in the other, and the calm, unhurried walk of someone who had delivered every kind of news a body could receive and had learned not to rush any of it. Miss Larimore, she said the name right too. I'm Dr. Calloway, neurology. She glanced once at Min-jae, took his measure in half a second, and did not ask if he was family. She simply included him in the room. I've got your imaging, and your bloods, and enough of your history to tell you what I think this is. Do you want him in the room, or would you like a minute? Vesper's hands were folded in her lap. She looked at them. He can stay, she said, and then, quieter, because it cost her something. He'll find out anyway. Dr. Calloway pulled the small stool over and sat, which put her below Vesper's eye line, looking up, so that nothing about the news would feel like it was being handed down. She set the folder on her knee. Your brain isn't making enough of a chemical that keeps you awake, she said. It's called hypocretin. Without enough of it, the wall between being awake and being asleep gets thin. Sleep leaks through it at the wrong times. That's the fog you've been describing, the gray you feel coming down. Vesper's mouth was dry. It has a name. It has a name. Dr. Calloway didn't soften it and didn't sharpen it. Narcolepsy, chronic. And there's a second piece. Because of the way you went down tonight, no warning, no dizziness first, straight to the floor with your muscles gone. That's called cataplexy. Strong feeling triggers it. fear, adrenaline, even laughter sometimes. The body just lets go. The word sat in the room. Cataplexy. Vesper turned it over. 9 days that envelope had been in her pocket, and this was the thing it had been holding. The shape she had refused to look at, and now a woman in a gray blouse had said it out loud, and it was smaller than she'd feared, and worse than she'd feared, both at once. "So there's a pill," Vesper said. "You give me a pill, and there are medications." Dr. Calloway chose the plural carefully. Stimulants to hold the day open. Other drugs to steady the cataplexy. They help. A lot of people live full lives on them. She paused. "I'm going to be honest with you, because I can see you're a person who'd rather have the honest version. There's no cure. This doesn't go away. What it does is get managed. Medication, yes, but also sleep on a schedule, knowing your triggers, not white-knuckling through 18-hour nights on a marble floor pretending you're fine." That last part landed. Vesper felt it land. "I hid it," she said, "to the doctor, not to him. 8 months. I thought if nobody knew. If nobody knew, it wasn't real." Dr. Calloway finished, gently. "I've heard that one before. It's real either way. The hiding just means you did it alone." Vesper's eyes stung. She pushed her glasses up and pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose and held them there until the sting went back down. She would not cry in front of him. That, at least, she could still control. "What do we do?" Minjae said. It was the first thing he'd said since the doctor entered. Vesper's stomach dropped at the word. "We." Dr. Calloway turned to him. Easy, professional. "She starts medication. We titrate. Find the right dose over a few weeks. She comes back for a sleep study, a proper one, overnight." "She had one," Minjae said. "The results are in her pocket." Vesper's head came up. He was looking at her apron, folded over the chair where the nurse had left it. At the pale corner of the envelope sticking out of it, he had seen it. On the floor, in the car, he had seen it and said nothing, and now he had it in the middle of the room like a card laid on a table. "You went by yourself," he said to her, quiet. 9 days ago, you went and you slept in one of these places, wired to a machine, and you carried the answer around in an apron, and you didn't open it. Minjae. Because a thing without a name, he said, you can still argue with." She stared at him. He had said her own thought back to her, the one she'd never spoken. She didn't know how he knew it. She only knew that he did, and that it was unbearable to be known that exactly by a man she was trying to keep at arm's length. Dr. Calloway looked between them and stood, smooth, reading the air. "I'll give you the 2 minutes," she said. "The prescriptions will be at the desk. Miss Larimore." She waited until Vesper looked at her. "You did the hard part already. You went and got the test. The only thing left is to stop being alone with it." She let herself out. The curtain track screeched. The door clicked. The room was very quiet. Then Minjae started to fix it. She could hear it happen. She'd heard him do it to problems 100 times, the way his voice went even and forward, arranging. "There's a doctor in Seoul," he said. "Best in the field. I'll have him on a plane, or we go to him, both. A specialist on retainer here for the day-to-day. You'll have someone with you on the floors that matter. Tae-woo can put a man on the east wing, on the service stairs, anywhere you stop. Work, so if it happens again, there's someone within. Stop." Louder, it cut through. He stopped. She was on her feet. She didn't remember standing. The gown was thin and cold, and she stood in it in the middle of the room, with her earrings in a plastic bag on a tray, and she looked at the man who had carried her out of a ballroom in front of 300 people, and she asked him the only question that mattered. "Is that what I am now?" "What?" "A wing." Her voice was low and steady, and it frightened her how steady it was. "A retainer. A man on the stairs. A doctor on a plane. You've had me for—" She stopped. corrected, made it exact. 8 months. And the first time my body fails in the light, you've already got the whole thing built. The doctors, the guards, the rooms I'm allowed to be in. I'm trying to keep you. I know what you're trying to do. She wrapped her arms around herself, over the thin gown, over the cold. That's what scares me. You'll do it so well. You'll build me a room so safe I'll never fall down in it. And there won't be a single door in it I open myself. He went still. Whatever he'd been about to say, he didn't say it. That's the thing I was afraid of, she went on, and now the steadiness was cracking at the edges, but she pushed the words through anyway, because if she stopped, she'd never say them. Not the disease, not the name, this. That the second it had a name, you'd stop being the man I chose and start being the man who manages me. That I'd stop being someone who's necessary and become someone who's kept. She pressed her lips together. I came into that house with 2 suitcases and a name that was only mine. I scrubbed the floors before I ever spoke to you. I have never once, not one day, been a thing that was kept. Vesper. His voice, for the first time all night, was not even. There was something under it. You're not. Then don't build the room. He took a step toward her. She took a step back. It was small. Half a step. Her heel found the frame of the bed and stopped her. But he saw it. The flinch, the retreat. And it did something to his face she had never seen before. In 8 months. In the dark. In the light. Something opened and then closed very fast, the way his hand had closed on his knee in the car. She sat down on the edge of the bed. She was so tired. The kind of tired that had a name now, a chemical, a missing thing in her brain that a stranger in a gray blouse had explained in under a minute after she'd carried it alone for 8 months. She pulled the envelope out of her own reach, out of her mind, and she looked at the little bag with her earrings in it, spelled right, and she felt the whole night close over her head like water. I need you to not talk for a while, she said. He didn't. She lay down on top of the blankets, in the gown, facing the window where the gray was going pale, and she pulled her knees up and put her back to the room, and to him, and to the specialists, and the guards, and the retainer, and the wing. She heard him move, once. She thought he might leave. Instead, the chair he had refused to sit in all night scraped an inch across the floor as he lowered himself into it, close to the bed, not touching, and stayed. She didn't turn around. Outside the one window, the city was waking up, and somewhere across it, in a building she'd walked out of 9 days ago, a machine had already written her name correctly in a file, and somewhere else, in a plastic bag on a metal table 2 floors under an empty ballroom, that same name sat in a dead man's phone under a photograph of her face, waiting for a thumb that wasn't hers to swipe it awake. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep. For once, the wall held. Kang Jung-suk arrived at the hospital before the sun fully cleared the trees. She came without a nurse, without Sua, without the cane she used only when she wanted to look older than she was. She came in the plum hanbok she had worn to the gala, the jade pins still in her white hair, and she walked into the neurology ward as if she owned the deed to the building. The staff moved out of her way. Something in the set of her shoulders told them to. Min Jae stood the moment his grandmother filled the doorway. Vesper turned toward the window, heard the chair scrape and understood before she looked. She sat up in the pale gown. Jung-suk studied the 2 of them. The boss of the Haedong circle, tie loose, hair no longer swept, sleeves shoved to the elbow. The maid in a hospital gown with her gold hoops sealed in a bag on the tray. She had built an entire night to answer one question about her grandson, and here was the answer, awake and breathing and afraid of her. Leave us a moment, Jung-suk said, not to Vesper, to Min Jae. He hesitated. He looked at Vesper first. That, too, the old woman noticed. Go find coffee, Jung-suk said, the kind that tastes like a mistake. She and I will talk. He went. Vesper watched the door close behind him and braced for the version of this conversation she had rehearsed for 8 months, the one where the family finally told her what she was and what she was not. Young-suk sat on the low stool the doctor had used. She let the silence sit for a moment. Then she said the thing Vesper had not prepared for. "Do you know why there were 300 people in my grandson's house last night?" "The contract," Vesper said. "The legalization deal." The contract was the reason on the paper. Young-suk folded her hands. The reason under the paper was you would never have been told. 2 of the old men and I built that night. We chose the guest list. We put enemies my grandson had spent 4 years avoiding under one roof, on purpose, with $2 billion on the table and every eye in that room waiting to see whether the quiet one could still keep his hands steady while the whole world leaned on him. Vesper went still. "It was a test," the old woman said. "The elders wanted to know if he could carry the new era, whether the boy who turned dark money into clean money could also lead the people who made the dark money in the first place. They are frightened of change. They wanted proof." "And he passed?" Vesper's voice came out thinner than she meant. Jung-suk almost smiled. "He failed the test we wrote." She let that land. He was supposed to sign, steady hand, cold eye, sign in front of the enemies, and prove nothing could move him. Instead, a girl in an apron fell down on my marble floor, and he dropped the pen and left $2 billion sitting on a table to carry her out the north door. Vesper's hands closed on the thin blanket. By every rule we wrote, that was a failure. Jung-suk's bright eyes did not leave her. By the rule I did not write down, the one I have carried 78 years and never spoke aloud, it was the only answer I would have accepted. She leaned forward on the stool. A man who cannot put down the crown to lift a person is not fit to hold the crown. He proved, without knowing he was proving anything, that he is the only one of them who can lead what comes next. The ruinous thing he did in front of everyone is exactly the thing that made them fall in line. The room tilted around Vesper in a way that had nothing to do with the illness. "You think you cost him the deal," Jung-suk said. "You think you are the weakness they will use. Child, you are the reason the old men stopped arguing. He did not lose authority on that floor. He cemented it." She stood, slow and upright. "I did not come to thank you. I came to tell you to stop apologizing for being the thing that made him human enough to follow." She was at the door when Vesper found her voice. "They'll say it was weakness. Some will." Jung-suk did not turn around. Weak men always name strength after the thing they lack. She opened the door. "Get dressed. My grandson has something to say to you, and he has been terrible at saying it for 8 months. Do not let him do it in a hospital. Do it where there is sky." They drove back to the estate as the light turned from gray to gold. Vesper did not wear the gown home. A nurse had brought her uniform, laundered, the apron folded, the sealed envelope still in the pocket where it had lived for 9 days. She put the gold hoops back through her ears in the car. She was still, in the end, the woman who arrived with 2 suitcases and a name of her own. She would walk back into that house as staff, because staff was what she had chosen to be. But at the north entrance, before she stepped out, Min-jae did something with his hands. He took off the midnight black tuxedo blazer he had carried, folded over his arm since the ballroom, and he draped it over her shoulders. Not around her like a claim, over her, like an offer she could shrug off. She did not shrug it off. She let it hang there, his blazer over her apron, the 2 lives stacked on one body, and she walked with him around the house to the pool where the family had gathered in the early light. They were all there. Sua in yesterday's emerald, mascara smudged, a coffee in each hand. Ji-hoon in his navy tuxedo, collar open, glasses fogged from the steam. Jung-suk already seated in a low chair with a blanket over her knees. having somehow beaten them home. Yoon at the tree line, earpiece in, watching the wall and not the family. The water lay flat and pink with the sunrise. Min-jae stopped at the edge of the stone. He took Vesper's hand. In front of all of them, without lowering his voice, he said the thing he had refused to say for 8 months. I love her. He looked at his grandmother, then at his sister, then at Vesper. I want a life with her. Not a hidden one, this one, here, with her name on it. Vesper braced for the room to break, for the shock, the objection, the cold arithmetic of a boss claiming a maid in front of the family that ran the circle. Soo-ah laughed, out loud, warm, spilling a little coffee. Finally, she said. Jung-suk did not even open her eyes. What? She said from her chair. Took you so long? Vesper turned, confused, and it was Ji-hoon who set his cup down and told her the truth she had never once suspected. We've known for months, he said. His voice was gentle, apologetic, the voice of a man confessing a kindness. Since the winter, we saw it. The way he started leaving the office lights on for someone. The way he stopped being. He searched for it. A locked door. You did that. We guarded it. Not from you. For you. We kept the family's mouth shut and the outside world blind, because it was yours to say, not ours. You knew, Vesper said. To all of them. We knew, Soo-ah said. He got softer. He got human. We weren't going to be the ones to spook it. The ground she had defended for 8 months, the secret, the wall between what she was and what she feared becoming, turned out to have people standing quietly on the other side of it the whole time, guarding it. She had been so certain she was alone in the dark with it. She had never once been alone. Something came loose in her chest. She reached into the apron pocket, under the weight of his blazer, and took out the envelope, the sealed one. Her name spelled wrong on the front, printed by a machine that had never met her. She held it up so they could all see it. I hid this, she said. 9 days, 8 months of hiding what it would say. Her thumb pressed the sealed flap. Not because I was afraid of the word, because I was afraid of what the word would let him do. She looked at Min-jae. I was afraid the second I had a name, you'd stop being the man I chose and start being the man who manages me, that I'd stop being necessary and start being kept. I came here with 2 suitcases. I scrubbed these floors before I ever spoke to you. I have never once in my whole life been kept. Min-jae took the envelope from her hand. He did not open it. He turned it over, looked at the wrong name, and then he did the only thing that could have answered her. He gave it back. It's yours, he said. The result, the routine, the doctor, the when, and the how much, and the whether you work. All of it is yours to decide. I will not build you a room. His jaw worked once. I spent 36 years learning to be a door that only opens one way. You don't need another wall. You need someone who follows your choices instead of giving you orders. He closed her fingers over the envelope. So tell me the choice, and I'll follow it. That's the vow. Not to protect you, to follow you. Vesper looked down at the envelope in her own hand. Then, slowly, in front of all of them, in the pink light, she slid her thumb under the flap and tore it open herself. First time, her hands. She read the line inside, the name of the thing that had been dropping the gray down over her for 8 months, and she did not flinch. Narcolepsy, she said, to the family, to the water, to the morning. With cataplexy, she folded the paper. There, it's real now, and it's mine. Soo-ah crossed the stone and hugged her, coffee and all. The deal did not die. That was the first thing Ji-hoon reported once the sun was fully up and the phones started again. Most of the investors waited. Word had gone out overnight. The 3 Eastern funds, the lawyers, the quiet money, and the answer that came back was patience. A man who would drop $2 billion to carry a servant out of a ballroom was, it turned out, exactly the kind of man they wanted holding their money, because a man like that could be trusted not to sell them out for a better number. The gesture the enemies called weakness, the allies called ballast. Most of them said the same thing in different words: "We'll sign when he comes back." Only Han Seok-won's people tried to cancel. They moved fast, before noon, calling it instability, calling it a leader who put a woman above the work. But they were a handful against a room, and the room had watched Jung-suk not stand up when the girl fell, had understood, the way old families understand, that if the matriarch stayed seated, then the matriarch approved. Seok-won's motion died on the vine. He did not take it as a loss. Ji-hoon relayed the message the old man left, in his dry counsel voice, before he took his ivory-topped cane and his oxblood pocket square out to his car. He congratulated Min-jae on his happiness. He said family was the truest wealth. He said he looked forward to meeting the young lady properly. Min-jae read the message twice and set the phone face down. He understood exactly what it was. Seok-won had come to the gala looking for a lever and had spent the whole night watching the boss track a maid across a room. Now the boss had stood in the sunrise and announced, to anyone who cared to hear, precisely where the lever was buried. Seok-won had his answer. He would not attack the man. He would attack the man's one soft place. He would make Vesper the most valuable thing in the enemy's hands. Vesper knew none of that yet. She was already back on her feet, already arguing. "I'm not stopping," she told Min-jae, in the kitchen, while Mrs. Beck pretended not to listen and listened to everything. "I'll cut the hours. I'll take the pills on the clock. I'll tell you when the gray comes, so you don't find out from the floor." She set a cup down harder than she needed to. "But I am not becoming a woman who is looked after. I have a company to build." She meant it. The residential management firm she had been sketching for a year, in the margins of her days, her own clients, her own houses, her own name on the door. She pulled it forward. She stopped thinking of it as a thing for later. Later was a luxury the Gray had taught her not to trust. "You'll need staff," Min-jae said. "I'll hire them. I know how a house runs better than anyone in this one." She almost smiled, present company included. He watched her for a moment, the woman in his blazer and her apron, drawing a business plan on the back of a grocery list, and he understood that the vow he had made at dawn was going to cost him every protective instinct he owned, every single day, for the rest of his life. "You carried me in front of 300 people, Min-jae." She looked up from the list. "Now you'll have to learn to walk beside me." He held her gaze. "Teach me," he said. Yoon Tae-woo found him an hour later on the terrace. He waited until Vesper had gone inside to take a call about a lease. Then he crossed the stone in his black tactical suit and put a phone down on the table in front of Min-jae. Not the one from Desmond's vest. That one had been imaged and bagged and locked downstairs. This was a second device, scuffed, cheaper. "We found his car," Yoon said. 3 blocks past the service gate, under a dead streetlight. This was in the wheel well. He did not touch it again. The vest phone was the one he used to talk to whoever sent him. This one is the one he used to work. Min-jae looked at the screen. Yoon reached over and woke it with a knuckle, careful, the way he did everything. The photographs opened in a grid, dozens deep. Vesper on the front steps in her uniform, taken from across the road. Vesper getting into a car with a borrowed coat, the morning she had gone to the clinic alone. Vesper at a market. Vesper at a bus stop. Under the photos, a document, her schedule, the hours she worked, the days she left the house, the route she took, and at the bottom, typed clean and cold, an address. The Sleep and Wakefulness Center, the neurology clinic, the one place in the world she had gone to be no one's problem but her own. Min-jae did not move for a long moment. The collapse on the marble had not made her a target. It had only shown the enemy that the target he already held was worth more than he'd guessed. The photographs were weeks old. Some of them predated the gala. Someone had been walking 2 steps behind her, learning her name and her roots, and the address of the room where she went to find out what was wrong with her, long before she ever fell. "How long has he had these?" Min-jae said. "Longer than she's been sick," Yoon said. "Or as long. I can't tell yet." He straightened. "The man's dead-ended in a cell and won't talk. But he didn't buy her clinic's address in a phone shop. Someone gave it to him." Min-jae looked at the address on the screen. Then he looked through the glass, into the house, where Vesper stood with the phone to her ear and a pen behind it, running numbers on a company she had waited a year to let herself want, in a blazer that was his, under a name that was entirely her own. He turned the phone face down on the table, the way he had turned Seokwon's message face down an hour before. "Don't tell her yet," he said. Then he stopped himself. The vow was 1 morning old, and he was already about to break it. He picked the phone back up. "No, tell her. She decides what she does with her own name being followed." His hand closed around the device. "But find me the man who typed that address, before he sends someone with better aim than a keycard." Yoon nodded once and went to watch the wall. Min-jae stood on the terrace with the dead man's phone warm in his fist, looking at the woman who had made him drop a crown to lift her, and understood that carrying her out of the ballroom had been the easy part. The hard part was learning to walk beside her while someone in the dark counted her steps. If you want to watch all the stories without any ads and also get access to bonus scenes, extended epilogues, and exclusive spicy chapters, head over to our Patreon. Scan the QR code on the screen. The link is in the description or in the pinned comment. See you there. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever hidden something about yourself? A diagnosis, a weakness, because you were terrified it would turn you into someone to be saved instead of someone who stands on her own? And when someone finally carried you, could you let them walk beside you instead of over you? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, love, and hidden truths, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.